This is my guide on how to spend 24 hours in Skopje, the capital of North Macedonia. As you can probably imagine, there isn't a huge amount to do here in Skopje, but I'm going to try and show you guys the best of the city and give you a little guide on how to spend your day here. So the best place to start off any trip here in Skopje is Macedonia Square, which is the large central square here in Skopje. It's where they have all the big celebrations and so forth. In the middle of the square is this massive statue of Alexander the Great, who was this big Macedonian Greek king. If you didn't know, he conquered vast parts of the world and had one of the biggest empires of all time. On my various travels, I've seen a lot of public squares, and I have to say, this Macedonia Square is probably my top 5. It's a beautiful square with its marble floors, amazing sculptures. It's even got great buildings surrounding it as well in some wonderful style. Right next to the square is the Vardar River, which is like a river that runs right through the centre of Skopje. And along the river, there's even more beautiful buildings. So we have a museum over there, which is, I believe, the Museum of Archaeology. There's a museum here on the left as well, which is the Museum of National Struggle, and I believe the building over there in the distance is the Foreign Affairs building. But for me, the highlight is this bridge. It's this old stone bridge that dates back to the 15th century. North Macedonia has been ruled by various countries throughout its history. The ancient Greeks, the Romans, the Ottomans, so there's lots of different influences and culture throughout the city. And especially with the Ottoman Empire being quite recent, there's a lot of Turkish influence throughout the city. I've only spent half a day here in Skopje, but I already love it compared to Tirana. I mean, Tirana wasn't bad, but Skopje is just so much more beautiful, which I hope you guys will agree with. It's so much more pleasant to walk around, it's calmer, even the people here seem friendlier, and the fact that there's more tourists here, I think tells a lot. Like I said, there isn't much to do here in Skopje, but one of the most important things, and things that you have to do, is visit the Mother Teresa Memorial House. I'm sure you all know who she was. She was this famous nurse who helped thousands and thousands of people in India. And even though she's of Albanian ethnicity, she was actually born here in Skopje, so they have a memorial house sort of museum dedicated to her. Apparently it's free to enter, so of course I'm not going to pass up on an opportunity to visit. The Mother Teresa Memorial House is a short walk away from the square, and it was indeed free to visit. The house is split over 2 floors, with the bottom floor largely being a chronicle of her life, whilst the upper floor contained a small chapel and some photos of her meeting famous people throughout the world. I strongly urge you guys to visit the memorial house if you have the chance. I certainly learned a lot from my visit. So as I mentioned previously, there's a lot of Turkish influence within Skopje, and that's best seen within the old Bazaar, which is just ancient marketplace that dates back to the Ottoman time. So I'm going to go there, check it out, and hopefully find a good spot for lunch. As you can see around the whole bazaar, it's loads of narrow streets, and apparently during Ottoman times this is the main centre of commerce, so you can see why it's so densely populated and so many shops and people. Oh, I think I've done enough exploring and browsing of these shops. Time to get myself some nice lunch. So I decided to get this pita mia kopa mishit. It's not quite Macedonian food, it's actually Turkish food, but I feel like being in the old bazaar, I had to try something Turkish. Hopefully it tastes good. My food has finally arrived. It's very cheesy and a lot bigger than I thought it would be. This whole thing is 280 dinar, which is what, about £3.50? Feels like it's very good value for money. I have no idea how I'm going to finish this though. Done with the food. It wasn't too bad, maybe a bit too cheesy and a bit too filling, but it was good value for money. I had something called pide, which I'd never heard before, but apparently it's a Turkish delicacy. Time to head out of the bazaar and continue with my trip here in Skopje. The bazaar is interesting. It's definitely worth a visit if you're here in Skopje. It has all kinds of shops, restaurants, cafes, and so on. The only thing I would say is, if you do go to like the clothes shops or like the jewelry shops, be wary of what you buy. I'm quite certain most of those things aren't real. So the next thing I recommend you guys doing in Skopje is visit the fortress, which happens to be right next door to the old bazaar. So you may as well visit it, and it just so happens that it's also free to visit. So from the car park, you get a pretty good view of Skopje as well. I mean, you can see the River Vardar there. There seems like a massive stadium over there. I have a feeling that might be the national stadium for Macedonia. And you can also see the mountains in the background over there as well. Just reached the top of the fortress, and I can't lie, it's a bit of a dump yard up here. I mean, it has so much potential, but it just hasn't been maintained well at all, which is a real shame because this fortress is well over 1,000 years old. It dates from the Byzantine era, which is sort of the second half of the Roman Empire, so it really should be looked after. It's a great piece of history. Despite the fortress being a bit abandoned, it is still worth visiting, just for the views alone. I mean, you can see the Macedonian square there right in the middle where I was at the start of this video, and the rest of Skopje. So I'm almost at the end of my time here exploring Skopje. I've got one last thing I want to do. If you know me well and have watched this channel for a very long time, you know I love my viewpoints and scenic views and my nature. And through watching this video so far, you might have realised on the outset of Skopje, a bit like Tirana, there's loads of mountains. And I'm going to go up one of those mountains to get a great viewpoint. But first, I need to catch a cab to the outskirts of the city. So I've made it here to Middle Vodno station, right on the outskirts of the city centre. From Skopje Forest, this was about a 20-minute taxi ride, which only cost me 422 dinar, which is about £6, which is ridiculously cheap. So I'm here in Middle Vodno station to get a cable car up to the Millennium Cross, which is one of the most iconic landmarks here in Skopje. It's essentially this Christian cross that's situated right on top of the mountain. It's so big and iconic that you can see it from pretty much anywhere in the city. And yeah, I thought it would be a fitting way to cap this day. So you can see here there's a bit more information on the cable car. So they have different opening times depending on what time of the year you visit. So I'm here in October, which essentially means that the cable car is only open until 5 o'clock to go up, and then the last one comes down at 5:45. Thank you. And here we are at the top of the mountain, right in front of the Millennium Cross. I can't lie, it's not that big in person. From the city, it seemed like it would be a massive structure, but in person, it's not that big. I mean, let me show you. It's not that big, is it? But it is still impressive. And considering how cheap the cable car up here was, you may as well come up here. I mean, even if you don't come for the cross itself, you have to come for these views. It's so picturesque. I mean, look how beautiful it is. From the other side of the mountain, you can see Skopje itself, but I feel like the views on this side are much better, and it's the perfect way to end my day here in Skopje, and it'll be a perfect end to your day as well. I guess that brings an end to this video on my guide on what to do if you have 24 hours to spend here in Skopje. Hopefully I've shown you it's a beautiful city and it's worth visiting. I feel like when most people think of holiday destinations, they don't really consider the Balkans, especially North Macedonia. But hopefully through this video, I've made you reconsider that. Tomorrow, I'm probably doing the most interesting aspect of my whole Balkans adventure, so make sure you subscribe to see that video whenever it comes out. I hope you guys are doing well, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.